All right. Well, here is Blood, Profit, and Glory displayed in pretty much all its glory.
That's right.
And so one of the things I want to be real quick about here is a caveat. These are prototype cards. They are early prototypes. And because of that, these cards haven't been cleared through our development team yet in complete total. So that does mean that some of these cards will mechanically change before they make final print. We're zeroing in, and I think we've pretty much got it locked in at this point. But at the time of this shooting, there's still some changes coming down, and I want to make sure that our fans understand that I wouldn't get too excited about any one particular mechanic right now if I don't talk about it, because it's probably not going to stay there that way.
Right. It's fair to say it's like 90% there.
I would say 95%.
Yeah.
We're basically just tweaking some really minute things that are creating edge cases in our development environment, and that's really where we're at on that. So as we talk about it today and talk about these cards today, just keep that in mind and make sure you understand that this could change. So basically, I think the best place for us to start is the 4 backer cards, right? Those are the 4 cards from the original Battle Kit backer that they came to us and donated a significant amount of money to us to help us make The Battle Begins. And in turn, we offered to design cards with them.
That's right.
So I think what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with the Jotun, if we can. And this card was designed alongside Jim O'Flaherty, who was our backer. We thank Jim immensely for his ongoing support of this project. He's one of our most avid sharers on social media and just always a real cheerleader for us in terms of doing better and getting better. So Lady Morgana the Fang is actually inspired by an MMA fighter in particular, and she's a very prominent MMA fighter.
Yeah.
But it's his favorite thing. He was very interested in MMA fighting, and he was very inspired by her story and all the things she stood for. And he wanted a card in the game that represented that. So that instantly led me into this warrior mechanic that we'd already been exploring as part of our design, but we didn't have a Type 1 really leading the warriors yet, right? We just didn't have that figurehead.
That's right.
And so when Jim brought this card to me, it was like, well, this just makes sense for us. Can we make her a leader of warriors as a whole? And for us, warriors kind of represent the shield maidens of Norse mythology. And so Lady Morgana is a warrior herself, of course, and so she works with any other effects that are looking for a warrior. But she also has her own focus too, like all the Jotun Type 1 combatants we've seen up to this point. And she does a really powerful ability, and she gives all other warriors focus too. Mm-hmm. So as we dive further into the warrior themes that are coming out in future expansions, you'll find she becomes kind of a centerpiece for the warrior build if you're a Jotun player. So this is the first time we've seen Jotun not be really in the air. Right. I mean, sure, we've had a couple of combatants in the original Battle Kit, but for the most part, the Jotun have always wanted to be in the air, and they wanted to fight from above. Fenris, his house represents a much more brutal end of the Jotun society, where they really do want to get down in the muck and fight and have glorious victories and glorious deaths as well. And so she really is the figurehead for that. And you'll notice that Morgana here is a 4 construction cost card. So by trait, she's going to be one of the most expensive Type 1s in the game at this point, for sure. And because of it, she does have some really good stats on her own, and she really does complement the other warriors. So just real quickly, I won't spend a lot of time, but the Shield and Sword of Hrothgar are both warrior combatants. We won't dive into their mechanics here, but I just wanted to let you know that those cards exist and are already playing on the warrior traits in this pack. So Morgana and Jim's design in general helped us really kind of direct this particular pack for the Jotun and really diving into this warrior mechanic. But we'll move on from Morgana for now and just understand that she's going to offer some significant firepower to the battlefield for the Jotun player, in much the same way that the Jotun are playing the game already. Let's talk about the Scythian, though, because the Scythian one is definitely doing things that are really unique and really new.
Right.
So Ferdinand Brackeye was designed alongside Aaron Reese, and Aaron is an avid card player and had very specific mechanical ideas as to what he wanted to bring to the game. He had seen videos. He had yet to obviously play the game because plenty of people hadn't at that time, but he knew what he wanted to do. So Ferdum represents an added element of control for the Cynthian that plays along the same lines as Centropolis. Ferdum in this picture is construction cost 3, but he is going to be a final version construction cost 4. So just like Organa, he is going to be a very expensive card to include into the deck builds, and certainly something that you're going to have to respect if you want to include him. But his power is pretty much second to none on the Cynthian side right now. So you can really expect to see Ferdum quite a bit on the table as you start playing against other players in this command pack. And let's talk a little bit visually about Ferdum, John. I mean, what was your inspiration for him?
Sure. So I got to talk a little bit about Aaron to kind of segue that conversation. Aaron and I had known each other for quite a while outside of our own game venture. We used to play online a lot. He used to play these kind of control type characters. He went by the name Stealth Pants. And to be fair, we wanted to incorporate all of our backers' ideas, and Aaron was no different. I've always enjoyed Aaron's humor. And so when he told me, I'm known as Stealth Pants online, I'm like, okay. So to fit it within our Cynthian theme, we kind of have this style guide, if you will, for names. And so we converted his Stealth Pants into Ferdum Brachii, which, if you know your Latin, it's kind of a derivative of Latin. So Ferdum Brachii is what he became known as. And with Aaron's background, with like playing stealthy characters or control type characters, we set out to make Ferdum more or less function like that.
Right.
And kind of a trickster, if you will. So Ferdum has not necessarily a keyword like we saw, or multiple keywords like we saw with Lady Organa. He's got 2 really powerful abilities. First of all, when you play Ferdum, he allows you to discard a card, mechanically speaking, discard a card and draw 2 cards. So he allows you to kind of get a little bit more resources. He has a knack of finding solutions.
And this is actually the first time we've introduced draw card advantage into the game. So this is the first opportunity for anybody to see that and play with that.
And in regards to that kind of that sneaky quality, he has the ability to redirect your opponent's effects, which is a really surprisingly scary ability.
Correct.
And so it's perfect for the Cynthian. They don't necessarily come at you with a lot of combatants. Where they put their resources in are either going to be like direct damage or utility type things like redirecting effects, or while they might have, if you recall in our The Battle Begins, it wasn't in our starter actual deck, but it was in the kit itself, was the Hecaton Warhawk.
Right.
They had these really massive combatants, but they don't have the numbers per se, at least not at this point in time. And so they feature a lot of kind of tricky utility plays, and Ferdum fits perfectly within that play style.
Yeah, and if you look at, you'll see Ferdum has still Solarium generation. I did forget to mention that Ferdum will be the first Cynthian Type 1 combatant to not generate Solarium. There's actually going to be 2 Type 1s in this pack, Cynthian and Projectus Immunis. He will also not generate Solarium. And in turn, he also does not have hidden. So
that's right.
Yeah, so those mechanics will change on Ferdum and Projectus slightly just based on play testing data information that we've driven from play testing. So let's move on to the second card that was designed by a backer, and let's talk about Dr. Lerner.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Lerner is a mercenary, so this is kind of fun to talk about a mercenary combatant. Obviously, mercenary combatants really change the scope of the game quite a bit. They give factions that you normally wouldn't want to have abilities, and that's the whole point of them. So Lerner here has had some significant changes as well. Number 1, he's going to be 6 Solarium instead of 4, which you're seeing on the card today. And number 2, he's got another line added to him that says if there's a Dr. Lerner in play, you can't deploy another one. By rule, you would normally be able to play another one. And so it's to prevent some degenerative experiences where people were getting multiple turns in a row by stacking Lerners into their influence row, and later in the game when they needed it, going 3 turns in front of their opponent. So you can expect that to definitely not be part of the strategy for opponents. But Dr. Lerner nonetheless still provides a huge power because he says, hey, let's just restart our turn.
Right.
So visually, what's Lerner represent? And like, obviously, we call him the time hopper, so it's pretty clear he's playing with time, right?
Right. So the backer for this is actually someone that Jesse knows a little bit more than I do, but the premises was that it wanted to have a play on time, and you can probably extrapolate this particular backer really appreciated his British sci-fi.
Correct.
And we'll just another doctor of sorts.
Yep.
And so we made Dr. Lehner.
Yep.
And he's our time hopper. So he's kind of our master of time in this game. So mechanically, at least in this iteration of the time hopper, he's able to give us a second turn or another turn after this
Correct.
turn. And so visually, he kind of also a little bit of a homage to the other doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have a phone booth to go into, but he has his own little holographic cube that he generates when he shifts through time.
Yep. And this, I did forget to mention, this is Peter Lerner was our backer, our Battle Commander backer that was inspired by our project. And I've worked with Peter for a number of years in my regular job and full-time job. And Peter was very passionate about this project for us. So we do thank Peter immensely. And Dr. Lerner is going to see play and going to be part of the table.
He's awesome.
So I'm excited that these backer cards aren't just cards we made out of...
Yeah, they're not just fluff.
Right,
They're
exactly.
Mechanically speaking, they're really fun.
Right. So then the last one is actually really unique, right? Because it's a site.
That's right.
So this was inspired by my aunt, Marcia Gallagher, was a Battle Commander backer for us, and obviously we're very pleasantly surprised to have family support like we've had in this project. Crazy Joe's Explosives is inspired by a place that's near and dear to me as a child because I grew up in Crazy Joe's Fireworks in Missouri.
That's right.
And so every summer I would go and work the fireworks stand with my aunt and uncle, and I learned a lot about business and learned a lot about hard work and perseverance and, taking a business from just a small little 10 by 10 stand to the business they have today, which is 3 football fields long. So, but Crazy Joe's is obviously a play directly off of their fireworks stand business. And, if you're in the Kansas City area, I'd encourage you to go visit it. It's a pretty cool place. But basically, we were like, well, obviously Crazy Joe's has to be a site, right?
That's right.
Like we knew Crazy Joe's Fireworks was a site. It's an iconic site in the Kansas City area during the 4th of July season. And so ultimately we needed to create a site for this as well. And it was almost a no-brainer. When she backed it, I almost instantly knew what we were going to do for a card. And I reached out to her, and she's not a card game player. She just wanted to support us. And I said, do you have any problem with me kind of just taking the reins on this and then bringing Crazy Joe's into our game? And she was just very, very touched by that. So what's Crazy Joe's do? Well, Crazy Joe's is probably the ultimate damage dealer we have in the game at this point. And it says you can activate it, Crazy Joe's, and you can put an explosive counter in a site. And that in itself isn't all that exciting. As you stack those explosive counters, in one fatal swoop of a command window, you can take all of them off of all of your opponent's site and deal 4 damage to every single site that has an explosive counter on it. So it's just wrecking sites left and right.
Yeah.
And you'll notice this site is also a 4 construction cost. That's important. This site is final. We are 100% satisfied with how it performs, and so you will be seeing this site in your opponent's builds. I can almost guarantee it, and you better have a way to deal with it. It also, coincidentally, is one of the toughest sites to take out.
Yeah, it has a tremendous attack value.
Right.
Being an 8/6 with 6 defense is definitely it's a decent defense, but that attack value, it's like the best defense in this case is
an offense.
It's an offense.
And Crazy Joe's believes that 100%.
Yeah.
So that covers the 4 backer cards. One of the things that I want to do, and I came to everybody when we were doing this command pack and said, what if you guys all got a chance to design your own card? You've been very close to this project for, in some cases, 3 years.
Yeah.
And what if you guys could put your mark on the game? Would you want to do that? Of course, everybody was ecstatic.
Super excited.
And really wanted to do that. So I want to highlight some of those cards that were part of the development team here really quickly, and we won't spend quite as much time on these. But ultimately, let's start with Kaiser since it's our man down.
Sure.
This card was designed by myself and Kent Kaiser, which is where the KYZR comes from, and Kaiser is his in-game name in other games that he plays. But basically, Kent was he's a big fan of a movie with some actors in it that are the unusual type, and so they may be suspects at times.
Yeah.
But basically, he wanted to create something that was deception, and he wanted people to not know what they were getting. They see something on the board and they think they're planning for something in particular, and then what they get is something totally different.
Right.
And so Kaiser literally clones, to a certain degree, any combatant in the game.
Right.
And so what that means is now some of those really expensive combatants that maybe are more difficult to play, Kaiser just says, I become that. And obviously, he gives a lot of value to the game in that respect and a lot of targets. So we really like where Kaiser landed. It's got really good play implications. And again, it really does come down to, can I fit him in every build? Or if I'm not fitting him in every build, what am I sacrificing to do that? I love the design choice and the deck building choices that he brings when you're looking at building a new deck.
Yeah.
So visually, Kaiser is an experiment, right?
Yep. Exactly. So there will be a lore if you follow us online.
Right.
There is a background that eventually will be completely expressed, if you will, and presented as far as what the background is for Kaiser. We mentioned in one of our videos about the Bertillon being a past experiment that's been released. Right. More or less, that's kind of how Kaiser comes into being. He's one of those experiments. Different company, different background, but broad stroke, he's an experiment that's now been released. Right. And from a mechanic standpoint, what's really nice about him, he messes with people's math. Right. Because when you see him, you think, oh crap, what is going to happen? What's going to happen? So knowing how, as the game evolves, we'll have more combatants in the game, it's going to be really difficult for your opponent to know what will the Omega experiment turn into. It literally becomes a bluffing mechanic every attack. Yeah, it's a fantastic card in terms of creating some surprise capability when it's on your side. It's not so much fun to play against it sometimes. But so then let's talk a little bit about Verker, because Verker is Frank Ruby's card. Frank's been with us since the get-go. He is the Berserker, and he is the first card that we're bringing to the game with the Berserker keyword mechanic, which was pretty much inspired by Frank to begin with, but we will definitely be playing in that space a lot more, not just on the mercenary side, but in some factions as well. And basically the Berserker mechanic says whenever he is declared as an attacker, he gets a +1/+1. So literally he just gets faster and faster, doing more and more damage. If your opponent doesn't deal with him soon, Verker becomes a wrecking ball that gets completely out of hand. Verker is final as well, just like Kaiser. We're very happy with where he's performing and how he fits into builds. Visually, John, I mean, obviously we were kind of inspired by Frank himself, right? Yeah, so Frank wanted ginger, so we got a ginger into the game. That's pretty much it. Frank's a ginger himself with a big beard, and so he kind of wanted all of that. Frank was very specific visually what he wanted, and we did our best to try to get that. And the artist, Justin Cruz, on this did an awesome job. So, in fact, we were so pleased with this particular image. It is the cover illustration for our box. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So then obviously the last one's one that's pretty near and dear to your heart, right, John? Well, yeah. In fact, it's technically, it's not the last, but it's one of the last ones. Right. That's true. It's second to last. Second to last. We'll save the best for last because it arguably is one of the best ones. Yeah. So Johnny, the gunslinger Johnny Cash. Yeah. So this is John's card. John played a gunslinger in another MMO for a long time, and obviously is very inspired by that character. Yeah. This card is not final. This card ultimately has bounty as you see it, and that will stay. Some of his keyword text has been changed. Johnny will get quick, which we talked about in an earlier video. But everything else pretty much is final on it. His stats, his Solarium generation, everything else. Right. Solarium cost. So basically he's just getting a keyword upgrade, and then he's getting a little bit of a tweak to his bounty ability. That's right. So that's pretty much it. So from a visual standpoint there, John, is there anything in particular you want to point out with Johnny? Ultimately, another kind of artist call out, we had Wiz Yakuza do the art for this, and Wiz is really a great guy to work with as far as he gets the descriptions really spot on. Most of our artists, I shouldn't say most, all of our artists do, but Wiz is really good about just dialing in right from the get-go. And but visually speaking, as Jesse mentioned, we were gamers first before we made a game, so we played a lot of MMOs, and this was a particular character I had made in an MMO, and so again, as Jesse mentioned, he's kind of near and dear to me, and I was hoping since day one, once we made the game, if there was a way of having this gunslinger mercenary, I wanted him in the game. And so I'm really happy with visually how it turned out. Thematically, he fits into our lore rather well. And he's kind of it sets up, I guess, for our last card, really, because he in the
'Cause they're a
lore
duo.
they're kind of a duo in
Right.
the lore.
Yeah, we haven't really explored this yet as far as revealing it to all of you yet, but it will be coming here in the coming weeks. And the final card is Matthew Greenleaf's card, who's my lead developer. And Matt was, he came to me and goes, what if we put a combatant in play that when you put it out in play, it could flip a tactic or condition card face down, an influence card. And I said, oh. I mean, like instantly I got a little worried. Like that was my first gut fear. And so the card you are looking at here today has definitely been tweaked since then. Harp has gone through a number of iterations because it is a very powerful ability and one that will definitely see a significant amount of play immediately and then probably ongoing throughout the game as we introduce more tactics and conditions. You're automatically going to find more targets for Harp to want to use. But ultimately, Harp says that when you play her, you can flip an influence card face down. So you can take that influence card that was sitting there and already been spent like a tactic and get it back. So it's pretty awesome. And so visually, John, she's a broadcaster, right?
Yeah, so I wanted a little different take. So, when we did the battle begins. We try to have a similar visual style for the Jotun, a similar visual style for the Synthian.
Right.
But the mercenaries, they really are kind of the wild card. All of them kind of have their own personality. You'll notice that almost all of them, well, in fact, all of them in this particular expansion, they're all type 1. So they're very unique on the world, if you will, of Solaria. So that being said, Harp in particular, she has some unusual tech. We'll leave it at that. It'll be explored further in the lore, but she has some very unusual tech, which allows her to basically, it ties into the mechanics as well. When she is broadcasting from a particular point, it's not just a broadcast. She's literally replaying the event. She, you could say, manipulates time in her own way. And so kind of a similar mechanic to Laner, but a little different at the same time, as far as interacting with time and dimension, if you will.
Right.
So she has this massive broadcast harness that once she powers it up, crazy things start to happen.
Right. Because of that, she does have a Solarian maintenance on her.
That's right.
Obviously, she requires Solarian to continue to operate and do her thing. She will also get some additional keywords, much like Learner, because the experience of multiple chain harps is really bad. So,
from that mechanic standpoint, we say things like chains. Some of you may or may not know what that means, but if you have enough Solarian, we can play cards over again, right? So things like Laner and Harp, when they were able to play multiple copies in the same turn, that was somewhat breaking the game.
We weren't happy with how it was performing for sure. So we ultimately put the same clause on her that Learner has. That once she's in play, you can't deploy another one. So you have to find creative ways to get her off your own board in order to play a second one, which is totally fine with us. Yeah, we love that kind of mechanic in play. And so the rest of the cards that kind of complement this from the Jotun and the Synthian side, well, we did talk about the two Jotun, but the Synthian side, you're going to find a little bit more in terms of building greater defenses. You're going to find a little bit of new ways to deal direct damage. And from the Jotun side, you're going to find ways to deal with pesky threats that are continuously beating into your board that you want to get off the board. Right. And that pretty much covers where we went with this command pack overall from a mechanics and design perspective. Obviously, most of these cards have a pretty significant development story that's related to something very personal to us. So we really love this pack because of that. It's not everybody had a say in helping bring something to light that really all plays together.
Exactly. Yeah. All right.
Thanks.